The self-titled collaboration album from American singer-songwriter, guitarist and producer Mark Kozelek of Sun Kil Moon and Red House Painters fame, and the British experimental ambient group Jesu, consisting of band members Justin Broderick, Dermot Dalton and Ted Parsons, was in the pipeline for around a year before eventually seeing the light of day back in January of this year. Containing Jesu's musical stylings, including elements of heavy rock, along with Kozelek's songwriting style, was one of high interest, especially after the last 2 years Mark has had in the release of his recent Sun Kil Moon projects, Benji and Universal Themes. Both albums I found to be very enjoyable and both highlighted as appearing on my best albums of the year lists of 2014 and 15, and here I find myself enamoured with a fair portion of what I've listened to. Lyrically, this is standard Mark Kozelek doing what he does best. Songs which are lengthy, lyrically abundant, full of detail, and Mark delivering words that are essentially minutiae when analysed, detailing every event of his life, irrespective of their importance or significance, yet are undeniably charming, and as per usual, they always make for a rather wondrous listen. Whilst not pertaining to a specific arc, one occurring theme centres on Mark and his relationship with his current girlfriend Caroline. Almost every song brings her up in some form and mentions an activity that the two are doing or will be doing at some point in the future, but there are moments where this gets its own song on the album, first appearing on a song of Shadows, an ode to Caroline which takes place after the two have had a falling out, and whilst Mark freely admits that at times he can be a handful and occasionally be pissy, he's thankful to have her in his life, he's thankful for her sticking by his side, and admits that without her everything would be a quote nightmare. And the final track, Beautiful You, which reads as multiple diary entries detailing daily events in Mark's life leading up to an upcoming tour in Israel, but before that he lists off moments spent with his girlfriend and again is appreciative for being in his life. Other tracks concerning relationships, both friendly and intimate ones with previous lovers, are found on Kozelek, where whilst making observations whilst out buying some food, he gets to reflecting on old friendships from years gone by and later talks about what he'll be up to later on in the evening. The track Sally sees Mark reminiscing on a previous relationship he had during his late teens with a woman in her mid-20s who had a kid, going on to talk about when the two split up, and reflects on how people come and go in everyone's life and how with some people you can very often lose contact with most along the path of life. Mark also ponders the togetherness of the everyday person on the track Good Morning My Love, noting how in certain scenarios people can often connect with one another over certain occasions. All of this inspired by a line from a movie called The Road to Las Vegas. This line makes up the song's chorus, What does rekindle mean? A very simple yet very poignant line. And with Mark Kozelek, you get the common theme that is death. You've got the very beautiful song Fragile, which is a dedication track to Chris Squire, the bassist of the rock group Yes. Father's Day sees Mark reflecting on a phone conversation he had with his father, but briefly mentions a news report he saw previously about a mass shooting spree where 9 people were killed as a result. Mark reflects on the death of a friend on the track Last Night I Rocked the Room Like Elvis and Had Them Laughing Like Richard Pryor, before going on to send a copy of his CD and a check to his sister on her birthday, leading up to him ending the track by performing at a concert and reading a piece of fan mail. America's Most Wanted Mark Kozelek and John Dillinger details activities Mark engaged in during a tour, notes a collaboration with a singer by the name Marsha Neal, reminisces on a performance where he invited fans on stage to dance during one of his tracks, and again ending on reading a piece of fan mail. During the track he hints at the death of Nick Cave's son Arthur, which is expanded upon more fully on Exodus, where he learns of the death after returning from a tour. He explores the concept of losing one's child, and despite himself being childless, he manages to strike a morbid yet touching tone that's highly endearing, ending the song with a touching sentiment, sending his love out to those who have lost a child in tragic circumstances. Instrumentally, the album delves into numerous genres which include ambient music, acoustic folk and hard rock. It is interesting to hear the variety and how Kozelek uses his voice in order to work with the music. However, this doesn't always produce the best results. The first 3 tracks are particularly weak, with an overuse of heavy distorted guitars with repetitive chords and drums. All 3 songs you seldom make out what Mark's saying, and considering that at some points his delivery can be fast paced, that can become a bit of an issue. But it's the second track where Mark opts for a harsher vocal tone, almost screaming his words, that are a big turn off. The third song does introduce some synths to act as a counterbalance, but even that can't distract your attention away from the guitars that don't do anything for me. Neither does Sally. Personally, this album's worst song. Not only does its placement on the album completely take you out of the moment, coming after two really enjoyable tracks, but the combination of Mark's layered vocals and choosing to go back to the strained delivery easily makes this the album's most miserable listening experience. The ambient and electronic tracks are more appealing than the latter, allowing more of an emphasis on beat and melody to shine through. Last Night I Rocked the Room has this infectious dance beat going on, complementing the electronic drum beat and high-pitched synth line. Unusual to hear very little in terms of organic instrumentation, but it's intriguing nonetheless. Father's Day with its bouncy synth line, hi-hat led beat, bass synth and hint of electric guitar in the background all balance each other out nicely. Exodus introduces repeating piano chords along with the downplayed and down-tempo synth tones that are beautiful to listen to, and Beautiful You, the album's longest track at over 14 minutes in length, is hands down the best song on the album. It's this continuous, spacey, dreamlike instrumental that overlaps your senses and blends seamlessly with the spoken word delivery. It's completely gorgeous, heavenly to listen to, and the time simply flies when listening to it. America's Most Wanted is one of this album's more organic tracks instrumentally, using a combination of guitars, real drums, and bringing in the synths around the midway point creates this off-kilter sound, and Fragile instrumentally is probably the most meticulously crafted track. It's just Kozelek's voice and him picking away at his guitar with additional synth tones coming in towards the back end of the song. What's created is something that you wouldn't have been surprised to hear on Benji, and by adding background vocalists, it just adds to this song's beauty. Although I don't feel like everything on this album hits home, the first 4 tracks on this album in particular did leave me with a great sense of dread. Once the ball gets rolling, the reasons why I find Mark to be such an intriguing and engaging artist ultimately strikes my core, and alongside Jesu's instrumentation, I do feel like that it's a match made in heaven. Obviously the harsher instrumentals on this album could have done without being on this project, as they do nothing for me. Mark's strained vocal deliveries don't do anything for me whatsoever, and I do find some subject matters to have less significance than others in comparison. But whilst this isn't anywhere near as good as Benji, I do think that this edges universal themes in terms of having more of an emotional impact and resonance on me as a listener. Overall, I score this album a 77 out of 100.
And after that I stayed up